The Universal Community Trust is a means by which we can grant the rights and protections afforded to every man and woman at their birth that are also known as the unalienable rights of mankind. We can afford them the guarantee of those rights within the trust under the jurisdiction of natural law. What that entails is a lot less complicated than it sounds. But there are lots of people that have commitments to a society that's been imposed upon them from their birth that they aren't aware that they can break free of if they choose that for themselves. When I incarnated on this planet on a certain day at the end of the 7th decade of the last century, I was endowed, purely because of my physical incarnation, with unalienable rights that were bestowed upon me by the creator of the universe, however you prefer to see it. And those unalienable rights are rights that cannot be taken from me no matter what. I can refuse to enforce them, which is I can acquiesce to a pretense that they don't exist, but they cannot be taken away. And I cannot give them away either, because I just have them. As long as I'm a being on this planet, I have them. Whether I exercise them or not, I still have them. They cannot be taken away under any circumstances. Whereas inalienable rights are rights that can be taken away. The unalienable right to do as you see fit with your life, as long as you don't infringe the rights of any other being to do the same. That would be an unalienable right. The unalienable right to be presumed innocent, until proven guilty. It's just you got to give a stranger the benefit of the doubt. It's rubbish to say there's no smoke without fire, because we know that there is. We can create smoke without fire. We can, and it's very, very seemingly innocuous programs like that which corrupt the minds of the people who run our justice system, and another unalienable right would be the right to superior guardianship rights over your children, to not have them taken away from you arbitrarily by any party for any reason whatsoever, unless you've actually harmed the child. And of course, children are being taken away now from their parents because they express an opinion that the state doesn't agree with. There is no freedom of speech, so there's another unalienable right. Freedom of thought, speech, and expression. But again, not without inserting the caveat that you cannot infringe anybody else's unalienable rights by the expression or the exercising of any of yours. The unalienable right not to pay for our existence on this planet. We're the only being that does. That can't be right. Since we're the only rational being who can actually do something about making this environment harmonious for every creature upon it.
The galvanizing framework for this community template is grounded in the fundamental principle of universal law. We are all free to do exactly as we choose, provided that the actions resulting from our decisions do not infringe the rights of any other blessed living soul. Or more simply put, my rights end where yours begin.
When we're being prosecuted for something that we didn't actually do, that might have happened, we're living in a world that doesn't know justice and where tyranny is reigning. When we're prosecuted for speeding in our car, going over the speed limit, but we didn't actually cause any harm, loss or damage, we're being prosecuted for something that didn't actually happen. When we light a match in a house, are we prosecuted for what might have happened if that house, unbeknownst to us, had been full of gas and the house would have exploded? Are we prosecuted for that? No, it didn't actually happen. But we're prosecuted for going too fast, allegedly, in our car. This is what I put to a Crown Court judge in a speeding-related matter. When I said to the judge that what we're talking about here is someone being prosecuted for doing something that didn't actually happen. That's what's happening. And no, this is for not giving information. Not giving information relating to an offence which didn't really happen. How can someone commit the crime of going too fast in a vehicle and not cause any harm, loss, injury or damage and be prosecuted for an offence? There is no offence. This is what might have happened. You're being prosecuted for what might have happened. That's a thought crime. The authority that we've encountered hasn't been a legitimate one. The worst thing you can do is be prosecuted and imprisoned for what you think. Because how can your thoughts actually create loss, damage or harm? We have a government that pretends to protect our interests and our so-called security when all they do is hold us in a very low security open prison. Because if we don't do what they say, whenever they say it, they automatically construe that a crime has been committed because you didn't obey their authority. We shouldn't have had the tyranny that we've had in the last 100 years. We shouldn't have had it. It's only because of the grandness, the all-encompassing nature of the deception that they've been allowed to perpetrate it. Never before has anybody with an internet connection had access to all of the information contained in the libraries of Alexandria, but we have now, and more besides.
The culture of privilege and elitism will disintegrate organically when all men and women are rightfully considered equals before the creator of all that is.
The United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, in my view, is an attempt to bring the unalienable rights under statute so they can be taken away again at a certain point, and to subjugate the real unalienable rights into ones that are regulated. You know, such as, you know, that every child shall have the right to primary school education. That is an attempt to force every child into primary school education. You know, it's not every parent shall have the right to home educate their child or educate their child as they see fit. It's not every parent has superior guardianship rights, or every man, woman and child on the planet has the right to a place to live and prosper in mutual cooperation and abundance. It doesn't say that. You know, the right to privacy, what does that mean? What does that mean, the right to privacy? You know, what about the right to innocence? Why isn't the right to be presumed innocent? Why isn't that one of the fundamental human rights that they declare? What we have to understand is how this situation came about in order to understand how to construct the solution in entirely peaceful ways. Because it's been proven again and again and again, and it will always be so, that violence begets more violence. We've all got a different path to tread, but it comes down to the same thing: self-realization, 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 self-realization. A trust is a relationship or a series of relationships, a set of relationships that abide by certain rules that either are implied by the trust or expressed by the trust in the form of a deed. So in its most simplistic form, if I give you a banknote now for £20 and saying, I'm trusting you to keep this for me until the end of the night, if you accept that obligation, you would be trustee of the note, and I would be grantor of the note. But you would be beneficiary of the value of the note for all the time that you held it, because you would have that £20. So if you needed it for another purpose before the end of the time that it was in your possession, you could use it as long as you replaced it. And that's how property works in trust. Even though it doesn't belong to the trustees, they hold it for the benefit of the beneficiaries. But who is the beneficiary in this case? Well, it would be you as trustee and beneficiary, and the grantor as grantor and beneficiary, because he wants his money back in the end. And it works in the same way. The trust, known as the laws of England and Wales, as defined by the British Constitution, as I was saying, that trust involves the Queen or the monarch being the grantor of the rights and protections of the law for the benefit of the people. The court officials are the trustees, the judges are the trustees for and on behalf of Her Majesty of that property, the property being the rights and protections of the law. They have to administer it to the benefit of the beneficiaries, and they're not doing it. So it's a gigantic breach of trust. And when the trust rules are breached to such a degree that there is out-and-out criminality going on in the courts of this country, where the banks are being protected and families are being thrown out their houses, when there's no enforceable debt in order to justify that, when we're in a situation like that, where we've got a criminal government waging genocide all across the planet, as it's been getting away with for centuries, if we don't stand up and put a stop to it, who's going to do it?
The Universal Trust is the umbrella trust. It's the grand trust. It's the one that protects every single community within the trust, because what we're going to do is acquire land in every place on this planet. And we are putting this together now. 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 Now.
It's very difficult to look at the system that's been imposed upon us and to believe that it's being run for the benefit of the people, when in actual fact, by the very Constitution of the United Kingdom, if indeed the Constitution is still in existence, because of how EU law has been imposed upon that Constitution, but in the Constitution it states very clearly that the rights and protections prescribed by the law of the United Kingdom is the birthright of every child and every man and woman. And what we've discovered over the course of our endeavours attempting to find remedy within their system is that the only remedy that's available is administrative. In other words, if the Crown or the bank or the corporation makes an administrative error, you can have proceedings against you struck out. But if you want to apply the law as it actually stands, as it is codified in statute against the banks and Crown interests, justice is never served. So because of that, we realised that it's pointless, being the very epitome of the definition of madness, to continue with the same endeavour expecting a different result. So we decided that, being myself, the grantor trustee of the Universal Community Trust, and the trustees who were appointed last year, we decided that the only way forward was to create our own jurisdiction under national law and to gain international recognition for having done so as a sovereign group of peoples, a sovereign community of peoples who've come together to stand under natural law together, and to trade cooperatively together, not for profit, to exchange sweat equity instead of financial instruments. But at the same time, we've managed to, or rather the universe has provided us with an opportunity to finance all of this with money from their system, with a banking system which doesn't involve usury. In other words, there's no lending involved of any nature or description. We create our own money ourselves to acquire the land and infrastructure of the trust.
Take a group of consenting people from any walk of life, anywhere in the world. Replace the debt-based financial systems with a usury-free permanent credit facility, based upon the cooperative agreement of sovereign men and women to provide goods and services for everybody in their community free of charge, subject to mutually agreed individual needs and requirements, and pursuant to a community trust agreement between each individual, the community, and its sovereign trustees.
Every single community that becomes a member of the Universal Trust is self-governing.
The Universal Community of Self-Realisation Trust Declaration. I, Freeman Michael Jonathan, this year, do hereby declare that the Universal Community of Self-Realisation Trust has been formed for the purposes of granting to every beneficiary named under this declaration the benefit of permanent credit to acquire every item, whether naturally occurring or organically manufactured by the parties to the trust, as well as every service provided for the community
until such time that their immortal spirit leads them to other experiences. The Granters Covenant. By this declaration, made in the city of Nottingham on the 10th day of July in the Gregorian year known as 2010 AD, my person hereby covenants to guarantee payment of every verifiable liability of the Universal Community of Self-Realization Trust and its beneficiaries upon presentment of the appropriate documents to the sovereign trustees of the Permanent Credit Facility created today for the purposes of facilitating the acquisition of the necessary infrastructure of the Trust. Declared and signed by Freeman Michael John Nissi. And we need 2 witnesses who aren't going to be signing this document. So, would anyone like to volunteer as a witness? Yeah. Okay. Agree to. All you got to do your signature and your name printed underneath.
Would you like to explain what the significance of that is?
Yes. Now this trust has been declared by deed a legal entity. This trust now guarantees each beneficiary, and each beneficiary means each community trust that's set up by the sovereign trustees will be a beneficiary of the Universal Trust, which I guarantee by a promise to pay any and all provable liabilities of those beneficiaries. We're looking for 100 people to start off each community, and there's no restriction on boundaries here. This is anywhere on the planet, anywhere in the universe for that matter. Therefore, what each member of each community trust needs to do to become a member is to make a pledge to the community of their sweat equity, whatever that may comprise of, whatever they do. What we're talking about is you pledging your sweat equity to a trust that will, when everything is up and running, provide for everything that you need. Now this isn't communism, just in case anyone's wondering. This is based upon the flip side of the community trust, and the flip side is the cooperative trade network. Everybody who is a member tenders into the network free of charge whatever good or service they provide for free. And for that purpose, they get every good and service for free within the network. And there's no boundaries around it. And whatever it is that you do, you can pledge that in. Remember, all of this is not for profit. We are just looking to create the line of credit to acquire the infrastructure, the land, the machinery, the equipment, everything that we need to bring all this into fruition.
By extricating ourselves from the existing system in as honourable a way as possible, to extinguish all liabilities and step into, first and foremost, a family trust. And a family trust is a private trust which creates the first layer of protection for all the property that the family has in its peaceful possession. And that if the family possesses any land, they will grant the land and the property on the land into perpetual trust for the benefit of their offspring, the next generation. And each family trust is a member of a community trust, is a beneficiary of a community trust. And each community trust is a member of the Universal Community Trust, which is the jurisdiction that all of the trusts fall under.
This is the way it works. The trustees and myself are willing to guarantee by a promissory note made payable to bearer, which is just as good as cash, we're going to guarantee every single provable debt of every beneficiary, that's everybody who steps over from this side of the line, which is what we have, the system of enslavement, to this one, which is everybody is free to do what they choose, provided they abide by the rules of natural law, which I've already stated. My rights end where yours begin.
The purpose of the community trust within the Universal Trust is it's so that every community can be self-governed and autonomous. that we're just saying that every community trust and every family trust has to abide by the principles of natural law. In effect, my rights end where yours begin. Do what you say you're going to do in any agreement unless circumstances that you couldn't control prevent that from happening.
Just imagine what it's like if we all do what's in our heart, and it doesn't have to be for all of our lives. It's not a sentence. It's not something that we have to do because everyone has to do it. We have to find out what we feel we should do and then act on it. Now that might be within any community, hundreds of different things over a long period of time. You don't have to commit to anything except a pledge that when you're in this community, what you do is whatever it is that can benefit the community and benefit you at the same time by expressing what you want to. It's your donation, free from encumbrances, free from charges to your community, which includes you and your family. That doesn't mean you've got to work 40 to 80 hours a week. That means you only got to do whatever is necessary to maintain the community.
This isn't rocket science. This is a way that we can apply a very simple and easily understandable concept of exactly what the law is and how it should be applied fairly and equally and reasonably with no excessive force in every single situation. And in every case, whatever the dispute is, every dispute should be settled on its own merits and not by regulation of Crown agencies and government departments that have hidden agendas in place.
We believe within the Trust that the only solution is that we create between ourselves a cooperative trade network which completely bypasses the finance system. Because let's face it, the main problems that we all encounter on a daily, if not hourly basis, are generally financial related.
Anything that can't be provided within the community itself will be acquired from neighbouring districts within the terms and conditions of cooperative trade agreements between communities.
The idea for Indigenous people to form their own communities and to become their own jurisdiction, to become their own financiers, to become their own healers, and to fulfill everything that they would normally be pre-programmed to believe the state provides for them. To reverse those roles is also to experience what it is we actually need and what it is that is just a superfluous material desire that's been imposed upon us that we think we need when we don't. We want to strip away the material nature of the way our lives have been and allow everybody within a community to be exactly who and what they are. The flaws in those documents predominantly occurred because of the inability of the elders of the indigenous tribes to understand that they were being hoodwinked by the language that was used in the treaties. And they ended up, as Santa was saying today, they ended up in a situation where they had absolutely no means of enforcing these treaties with the Crown. And the Crown also offered no consideration in return for running the judicial systems of all these territories and so-called dominions. And because of that, the indigenous peoples who've entered into these tribes right across the planet, and especially the tribes who have become part of various United Nations conventions and treaties and ratifications, they've ended up in a position where they get stuck in a limbo where they can't afford to take on legal battles to get what they've been promised in treaties, which they haven't really been promised because the treaties are unenforceable, they haven't been witnessed properly, they haven't been sealed, there's no guarantee of any consideration on the Crown's part because of little things like they didn't have it witnessed. And because of this, we find ourselves in a position where many of the indigenous elders right across the planet are looking for a way to express the unalienable rights that have never previously been properly expressed.
Violence will never be part of the solution.
And we're not saying we're going to do this in any other way except by using only peaceful methods. And we believe that where where the world is heading is to a situation where the indigenous peoples, they reclaim the land that was their birthright, and they put the land into perpetual trust for the benefit of the next generation. And we're just going to see the organic dissolution of elitism and tyrannical dictatorship and all of the rest of the corporatism that's held the world back for centuries. People are saying it's had a very profound effect on them. They're looking at the world in a different way all of a sudden, just because they were able to empathize with my perspective, the way it was portrayed. You know, we're not asking for anyone's permission to do this. We're just creating a better world for anyone to choose to be part of. Anybody, without exception. The main thing that was being conveyed by all of them was that they don't know how, but they feel this is what they've been trying to find in their lives, a way of doing this. And as soon as they hear the information in the way it was presented, it has an effect on them which resonates in their heart, and they suddenly feel, but this is what I want to be part of, and this is what I've always really been working towards, and I just hadn't been able to express this through a cognitive realization that that was the case.